October 20th, special meeting of the Orange Town Plan and Zoning Commission. I am Commissioner Ozzie Parenti. Let me introduce those seated at the table. We have the Orange Zoning Department, Jack Demerjen, Tammy Trantalis, Commissioners Tom Tarenti, Paul Kaplan, Kevin Cornell, and Judy Smith, and Town Attorney Vin Marino. We're here tonight on a special meeting to give Attorney Marino an opportunity to walk us through some statutes that have been recently enacted by the state legislature, and they have an effect on zoning and training of commissioners and the zoning staff and many other things. So without any further delay, Vinny, you want to just walk us through you made some very good memos for us.
Right, and I appreciate the opportunity to get together with Mr. Chairman. And let me open by saying I'm pretty convinced that. Oh, I got to put this. Is this not? Oops. Can you hear me now? Yeah. I don't want anyone to really hear me. I think they legalized marijuana so that they could not let anyone focus on this stuff. Right. Everyone's focused on pot right now, and no one's talking about all the other changes that are significant to the land use statutes. So there are two public acts. I've only provided you with one, but I have provided you with a memo that discusses the other one. The two public acts are Public Act 21-1 and Public Act 21-29. You should have two versions of Public Act 21-29. One has my highlights on it, and we're going to use Public Act 21-29 as our guide. Some of this is for informational purposes only. I also provided you with kind of a discussion outline. And after I created the outline, I then kind of created a set of questions. And these questions, ultimately, the commission is going to have to answer. And again, the purposes of tonight is to have a discussion, to become informed, not necessarily make decisions. Mm-hmm. All right. For the most part, you have, I believe, you have until April for outdoor dining. You have until January of 23 for, I think it's accessory apartments. And so we have time, but if we don't know about it, we won't take action. So,
and we're in good shape time-wise as it relates to cannabis.
We are.
Right? I mean,
yes.
we have a public hearing coming up on that in a couple weeks.
Correct. Next regularly scheduled meeting, we have the three options that we laid out for each other going to public hearing. November 3rd. Yep.
So just to kind of start from where the legislature is going, right? Because really there's a movement in Connecticut to change the way zoning is kind of adopted and to make it more unified throughout the state. There's a fair housing initiative so that the concept is every town should have its fair share of affordable housing. They call it, I think, the Fair Share Initiative.
Going to replace the 1030?
No, I don't know what it's going to do yet, other than try to get towns like Orange to get its fair share, right? Because the argument is Bridgeport and New Haven and Stamford, the big cities have the 10% or the 20% or 30% affordable housing, and towns like Orange don't have anything near 10%, and it's not fair. And whether it's fair or not, that's the way it is. And there are reasons. There are reasons because of infrastructure not being able to support it. And there is what I provided you by email, a complete report. It's about 185 pages, but I gave you tonight just a snippet. It's called Zoning for Equity. It's put out by Orange Communities Alliance. I will warn you, it's somewhat offensive, and really attacks our town and the way that we employ zoning, and basically suggests that we employ zoning for racial purposes, to prevent affordable housing in our town, that our purposes of acquiring open space is not for environmental reasons or for character reasons, but to keep developable property off the market. So it's a good read. It's I commend it to you, but I do warn you it is offensive. But we shouldn't get distracted by that. What we need to understand now is what has the legislature done, and what do we have to do to conform to it? Because whether we like it or not, this is now the law. All right. So what they did, and if you follow my outline in Section 1, they added new definitions and they changed new definitions. I just want to make you aware of them. Accessory apartment, which we'll get into a little bit later.
And you're talking about your memo that's 12 pages long, right?
Correct.
Just wanna make sure I'm looking at the right thing.
It starts with Public
Accessory.
Act 2129 discussion outline.
All right.
Okay, and we'll come back to the questions later. But so
Oh, I was looking at the wrong thing then.
No, it
starts on page 3.
On page 3. That document, page 3.
Okay, so the legislature has now provided us with a definition of what an accessory apartment is, and we're going to get into this a little bit later. But basically, what the law now is every single family dwelling in the state of Connecticut is entitled to an accessory apartment. Zoning cannot prohibit it, but we'll get to the but later. Okay, so that's the movement right now. And that's the first step in this trying to get more units of affordable housing into towns like Orange. Yes?
Does it get into coverage? Ground coverage?
We're
None
gonna,
of that is relevant.
None of that is. We're going to get into all of that. But
Setbacks.
so basically, right, you have to start retraining your mind a little bit because they're changing the rules as we go. Okay? And again, it's the law. So we're here to conform to the law, whether we like it or not. The definition of as of right means able to be approved in accordance with the terms of a zoning regulation or regulations and without requiring a public hearing be held, a variance special permit or special exception be granted, or some other discretionary zoning action be taken other than a determination that a site plan is in conformance with applicable zoning regulations. So clearly, this is a new definition. Clearly they felt there was a need to inform you all what it means as of right. And that's because, again, when you're sitting in an administrative posture, you are obligated to approve something that conforms to your regulations. And that's basically all this says. I've never seen that be a problem for this commission, but I guess it's a problem throughout our state.
Is that a change to the, it looks like the substance is what I mean.
Reaffirmation.
It's an actual affirmation of what it is.
Okay.
All right, but it's a new definition. And then this concept of cottage cluster. It's a grouping of at least 4 detached housing units or live work units per acre that are located around a common open space. So again, it's a new concept, and again, this concept could have implications to a pending application. When we're talking about a density application or an application that may come forward. Concept of cottage cluster. So again, I just want you to be aware of those definitions. All right. Now, if we go on to Section 2. Section 2 is, again, this is pretty straightforward. It's fees. So what the legislature has said is the commission is entitled to charge the applicant the cost of reasonable fees associated with any necessary review by consultants with expertise in land use of any particular technical aspect of an application. So if, for example, you needed a soil scientist, if you needed an engineer, and you felt you needed that, you have the ability to charge that now under the law back to the applicant if you adopt a regulation that says the applicant must pay. So some, and this applies, Jack, this also applies to the Wetlands Commission. Mm-hmm. So, we want to take a look at your regulations because we may want to put a regulation in place that says you retain the discretion to make the applicant pay for this. So I would suggest that my recommendation would be that you have a regulation that allows you to do this Because if you don't, you cannot do it. Okay? Because the law allows you to do it, but only if you adopt a regulation. In order to adopt a regulation, as you know, it's the public hearing process. So it's something that would take, 60 to 90 days to put into place. So, this is question, I think it's question number 1. Does the commission want or need to adopt a regulation requiring an applicant to pay the cost of reasonable fees associated with any necessary review by consultants with expertise in land use of any particular technical aspect of such application? Don't have to answer that question today. It's something for you to think about. Okay? And so that's why I said it. We could probably,
No deadline on that, though.
No
right?
deadline on that.
It's any time.
no deadline on that at all. You can adopt it at any time, but you're going to have to adopt it before the application is filed that you want to use it for. Right? So, in other words, if someone came in tomorrow with an application and you said, we really need 18 experts here, and then you're like, let's put a regulation in place, it's not retroactive.
Right.
So, I would recommend you do that sooner rather than later, particularly with everything that's going on around the state.
I
All
think
right.
we have that already, because we've been reimbursed for additional traffic.
I'm
But
not
I
sure it's
think what we do
codified,
is
though.
we,
I thought-
I think we strong arm the applicant
Right.
I don't-
Okay.
I
when
don't
they need
think
us for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
think
they've always
it's-
gone for it.
No one's ever protested because they want your approval.
We do that
Right.
all the time with, or have done it with traffic studies.
To get a review, an
Right.
independent review, right.
But
Okay,
now,
so now
but
we
now
will
it's
cut.
now it's legal.
Now it's legal.
Great, okay, that's good. Well, I'll sleep better,
Now it has the added benefit of being
being legal.
Yeah, the added
We've
benefit.
done wrong for the last 20 years.
Right. So, yes, no more shakedowns. Now it's legal. So, moving on to Section 3, this concept of temporary healthcare structures. Now, again, this is a concept that you don't come across often. I actually don't know much about it at all. So what I did, and the only new addition to the statute is the ability for the commission and the town to opt out of the statute. That means you don't want to be bound by the law. You're going to be bound by your local regulation. So this new law gives you an opportunity to opt out. There's a process.
Opt out of what?
Well, I'm going to tell you.
All right.
So I didn't know what it was. So what did I do? I went to the statute and I said, all right, what is a temporary healthcare structure? Temporary healthcare structure means a transportable residential structure that provides an environment in which a caregiver may provide care for a mentally or physically impaired person that A, is primarily assembled at a location other than the site of installation, kind of like a camper or trailer, has one occupant who is mentally or physically impaired, is not larger than 500 gross square feet, is not placed on or attached to a permanent foundation, and complies with the applicable provisions of the state building code, fire code, and public health code. Now, there's been a law that has allowed this. We've never discussed it because it's never been an issue. What I'm envisioning is saying, okay, if you don't opt out of this, you're going to be bound. Someone could come in and have it. Picture people now having 500 square foot prefab structures on their front yard, on their side yard. And so kind of like a camper or a trailer that annoys a neighbor. Now, a temporary healthcare structure could be put in place if you don't opt out. Okay, so this is a policy question, whether or not you think that this is a matter of concern. You can, I provided you with the definition of what a healthcare structure is, and I just read it to you. If you do not opt out, then you'll be bound by the language of Section 8-1BB, and you'll be required to approve it. If you would like to opt out, the way that you opt out is as follows. A municipality, by vote of its legislative body, which is the Board of Selectmen, or in a municipality where the legislative body is a town meeting by vote of its Board of Selectmen, may opt out of the provisions of this section and the provisions of subdivision 5 of subsection D of section 8-2, which is what I just read you, as amended by this act, regarding authorization for the installation of temporary healthcare structures, provided the zoning commission holds a public hearing in accordance with Section 8-7D, affirmatively decides to opt out within the period of time allowed under 8-7D, so that's that 35-day window, states upon its records the reason for such decision, and publishes notice of the decision in a newspaper of general circulation. So you have to hold a public hearing, and you have to say, we vote to opt out. Think of the opt-out as adopting a regulation. You're adopting a regulation to say this law doesn't apply to our zoning regulations. And once you've done that, then it's got to go to the Board of Selectmen, and they have to vote as well. Okay? So it requires, I believe the law is, it's a 2/3 vote of this body and a 2/3 vote of that body. So that's the first question that you're going to have to answer for yourselves. And then we move on. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Yeah, a quick question. The person being cared for does not have to be related to the site where the structure is erected?
It doesn't speak to that.
Okay.
That, in other words, the caregiver doesn't have to be a family member?
No, on the
No, the
property.
person receiving care.
Doesn't
Right.
it?
It's not like your, God forbid, your mother needed care, and it was efficient to have this mobile unit pull up in your driveway until she was better. The way this is written, I could decide to erect a temporary health structure on my property,
For-
rent it out
For the
to
healthcare
care
worker.
for-
Who's helping my dad?
Let's
Yeah,
go to 81, 8-1 double BB.
Okay.
Okay, a temporary health care structure shall be allowed as an accessory use in any single-family residential zone on a lot zoned for a single-family detached dwelling that is owned by a caregiver or mentally or physically impaired person. So that's step one. You have to be a caregiver or an impaired person, and used as his or her primary residence. So if I'm a caregiver, I'm a nurse, I now can put a structure on my property, and now I can provide care, and I can have an income from that, right?
Okay.
I think that's the way I'm reading this.
Who lives
It-
in the structure?
Right, you're
The impaired person.
so it could be, because I was reading it the
The other
exact
way.
way that Kevin said it, which was that the impaired person was in the home and the caregiver was in the...
It could go either way.
That's what it sounds like.
Interchangeable,
Yep.
It could go either way. So, so on the one hand, if you're a caregiver, it's an opportunity for you to have a business, right? And if you're a person who is in need of care, it gives you the ability to have your caregiver live on site, but not in your house. So, and you may think that's okay, but not the other way. So you may want to opt out and adopt regulations that may allow it one way, but not the other way. These are things to think about.
Right.
Okay?
Thanks.
That's all we're doing here is trying to get the mind working. All right, so zoning regulations. So there was a lot of amendment to Section 8-2. 8-2 is your enabling legislation that allows you to adopt zoning regulations. And the general question is, are the existing zoning regulations for the town of Orange in compliance with the new legislation? Just keep that question in mind. And does the commission want or have to amend zoning regulations as a result of this new legislation? And the reasoning is there's some new stuff in here, and then there's stuff that may affect existing stuff. So I just highlighted the stuff that I thought might be relevant to you all. So this is now 8-2, subsection B. It says the zoning regulations adopted shall. So these are things that zoning regulations must do. They must be designed to lessen congestion in the streets, to secure safety from fire, panic, and other dangers, promote health and the general welfare, provide adequate light and air. Okay, so that is somewhat similar, but there are little nuanced changes. Protect the state's historic, tribal, cultural, and environmental resources. All right? So that's something, again, you may be able to say, maybe we need to do an evaluation of our town to see if any of this applies. Okay, basically the next one is facilitate infrastructure. Okay, then consider, these are new. Consider the impact of permitted land uses on contiguous municipalities and on the planning region. as that is defined. So, that kind of brings us back to housing, right? So your zoning regulations need to now take into account how your town interplays with the adjoining property, the adjoining municipalities, as well as your regional municipalities.
What does the reference to subsection A, what is that reference? Is that the zoning regulations generally?
Yes.
So in other words, any time we contemplate an amendment to the zoning regulations, we basically have to consider these. We have to make these findings.
These are this is your guidance. Your regulations need to take these things into consideration. And if they violate any of these, then they're subject to being stricken. All right? Address significant disparities in housing needs and access to educational, occupational, and other opportunities. All right, again, now we're getting into this zoning for equity concept. Promote efficient review of proposals and applications. Well, I think we do that well here already. And affirmatively further the purpose of the Fair Housing Act. So again, these last 4 items are new, and it's very much geared toward affordable housing, fair housing opportunities. So this is just your guidebook for when you're adopting a regulation. Yes, okay.
So under H, a disparity between what and what?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, so a lot
Or
of
where and where?
exactly.
Okay.
So again, we may say address significant disparities in housing needs and access to educational, occupational, and other opportunities for the Orange resident. Because it's going to be different in our town than it's going to be in West Haven, right? Or Derby. So what we consider. Because our housing is more expensive, because we're on larger parcels. So you might say, hey, maybe we shouldn't have acre-and-a-half zoning. Maybe we should reduce the size of zoning, to accommodate the disparity in housing. This is what they want you to start thinking about. Not suggesting you go in that direction. And in our town, because we don't have public sewers, what you have to consider is the land and what the land can support. And, in a lot of ways, what they're arguing is that towns like Orange are hiding behind the lack of infrastructure in order to maintain its current structure. I think that's a bold statement, and an improper statement. But there's a lot of that in here. But this is what is coming at you, and this is what is being influenced up in Hartford. So that's where this is coming from. All right. Now, zoning regulations may. Okay, and I just put in Section 9 because this was really on the new one is require estimates of vehicle miles traveled and vehicle trips generated in lieu of or in addition to the level of service traffic calculations to assess the anticipated traffic impact of proposed developments and the potential mitigation strategies such as reducing the amount of required parking for development or requiring public sidewalks, crosswalks, bicycle paths, bicycle racks, or bus shelters, including off-site. So they're including off-site now, so that's new. Normally we're just considering on-site when we're doing an application, and they are. I would say this is probably geared more towards like a transit-oriented development, but it's something that you can take into consideration that you may want to have a regulation that requires the applicant to provide you with estimates of vehicle miles traveled. I don't know what the hell that is, but it'd be interesting to see what the applicants provide us with, and vehicle trips generated in lieu of traffic calculations. So I don't know. Let's say I assume that
this is part of the law now, though.
this is the new law.
This is not.
No, this is new.
Right.
So I would assume that is if I'm developing Fieldstone Village, and I'm going to have residents live there, there are going to be some residents that are going to commute to Stamford to go to work. Well, that's 30 miles, 60 miles round trip. So this development is going to cause the migration of people such a distance, or it's not, and you can maybe they're saying it because of the environmental impact of travel. I don't know, but it's there. So something for you to know, think about. Now we get to this shall nots. This is what I think is where we really need to be focused, because I think this affects some of your existing regulations. So your zoning regulations shall not prohibit the installation of a temporary healthcare structure unless you opt out. So if you do not opt out of that 8-1BB section, then you cannot prohibit it. Okay? So that's easy for you to consider. The next one is prohibit the operation in a residential zone of any cottage food operation as defined by 21A-62B. I didn't look at the definition. I apologize for cottage food operation, but it's probably some type of a home operation. But there's a statute that defines it.
It is. It's a home occupation. We get some of them in town, a lot of it for cooking and things like that. We might have some regulation that would contradict that if we're not allowed, or we are not allowed to prohibit the operation of it. We do have one or two regulations that I would see conflicting with that.
Similar to the operation on near Pawgusett Club. Isn't there I haven't been there, but food produced on that property?
Not to my knowledge. I might just not know about it either.
Club Road.
Club Road.
No, doesn't ring a bell.
I know we had one in the last year for somebody baking and selling their goods, but like I said, I know there will be one or two regulations that contradict that.
And the statutory definition of cottage food operation means any person who produces cottage food products only in the home kitchen of such person's private residential dwelling and only for sale directly to the consumer, and who does not operate as a food service establishment pursuant to Section 19A-36 or regulations adopted pursuant to Section 21A-101 or a food retailer, distributor, or manufacturer as defined by other statutes. So it's someone who produces food for resale direct to consumer. So I don't know how you would even know about that. I've assumed something they're going to produce a product and they're going to mail it out.
It's something through the health. We have to sign off on a document for the health department, but the health department is mainly the one that gets cottage food applications.
We're not talking about the farm stands or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
No. So again, it was new, so I raised it to you. I don't see it as being an issue. Now we get on to things that may be of concern to you, and I put red marks on these. Establish for any dwelling unit a minimum floor area that is greater than the minimum floor area set by the building, housing, or other codes. So that means, your ability to limit the size of a house is now restricted, right? Okay. Place a fixed numerical or percentage cap on the number of dwelling units that constitute multifamily housing over 4 units, middle housing, or mixed-use development that may be permitted in the municipality. So think about our Todd that we had.
We capped it
Or,
at
We capped it
50.
at that's now
That
illegal.
would not be, you could,
Now you can't put a cap on it. So if you have a regulation that allows density, anyone can come. It's not like in this year we're only allowing 350 this year. So now it's fair game for everyone.
In any zoning district.
Yeah,
In any zoning district.
coverage setbacks, do they apply?
Setbacks would still apply.
Okay.
If it's not necessarily if it's an 830G, but for regular zoning, yes, you would have setbacks and
So that
coverage.
could limit it, but you can't specifically put a
You
numerical
can't
cap.
exactly. So if I'm allowing a 4-story structure that can accommodate 200 units, and I want that for a Todd, you can't say like we had said, well, you're only allowed to have 280, and so the next developer in the adjoining says that's not fair. So this addresses that. All right, so we have to be mindful of that, and we have to look at our regulations and say, do any of our regulations currently put a cap on the number of dwelling units related to
Local.
mixed-use development,
Local shopping center.
right? Middle housing and multi-family housing of 4 units or more. All right, so, and I believe all of our regulations that would address density probably have a cap. I know that Todd did. We probably have it over at Firelight.
Firelight, that's, I couldn't think of Firelight, but the local, that's a
Right.
local shopping center.
Right. And we should check the PRD. I think we have a couple of PRD regulations as well that we might want to look at.
So
So-
do we need to clean those up, or just?
Yeah.
or-
I mean,
or just,
they
they're not
violate the law.
enforceable, they won't be enforceable.
They violate the law,
So, if
so
you
we
do-
should probably
Null
clean
and
them up.
void,
like,
really.
the Fieldstone was 3.75 units an acre, like that it would no
Can't do
longer,
that.
okay.
See, now that's the other thing to take into consideration, right? You say, we normally try to limit the number of units on an acreage basis.
Right.
Now, we don't put a number on it, and arguably, that's not even a percentage,
But it,
right?
No, what, yeah, why, how is a,
Because it's placing a cap.
well, what about a lot density requirement?
Again,
it's
these
not
are,
a numerical cap.
Yeah, not a-
It's acreage times something equals a number.
which is a number, that's numerical.
Ooh.
Look, let's litigate it and find out.
No, I'm not,
No, I'm saying,
Yeah,
these are
it's
things
not
we have to
clear.
think of. What?
It's not really clear. I mean,
It's unclear, and if it's, because zoning is in derogation of property rights, they're read in favor of the property owner, right? Because we're a country built on property rights. So, so what does that mean? Place a fixed number. Well, a fixed number to me is 100. It's not 3 per acre, because
Right,
that's a
right, right,
variable,
right.
not a
Right.
fixed.
Right.
That's what we would argue.
But that's,
But-
But then you come out with a fixed number.
But what was
Come out with the cap.
the intent of the legislation? The
Right.
intent of the legislation was likely to not allow towns to limit the number of these units. That was probably the intent of the legislation. So, I don't know what a court would do, but
so basically, there are no bulk regulations anymore.
that's
No,
what it sounds like.
No.
Well,
Yeah,
so-
well, that
I don't
that
think-
does seem to be what it sounds like.
Yeah, but I mean, so you're saying the front yard, side yard, rear yard.
you could have setbacks.
And you can't have lot density requirements, percentage of the lot developed?
FAR might be a concept that is no longer
Right.
legal.
Exactly. Arguably, no, right? Because anything that results in a fixed number is now prohibited. And we could say it's a variable number because it's 3 times the number of acres.
right.
But that might not be a winning
So
argument.
I
That
want
may
to
be a
build.
losing argument.
So I want to build the Empire State Building.
Right.
For residential on Firelight.
This is, again, ladies and
You
gentlemen,
don't
this
think-
is the trend
Yeah.
in this state to break through zoning regulations that have limited the development in rural towns. This is the start of the
Homogenization.
of Connecticut. All right, exactly right. And all we can do is we need to understand the law, and we need to see if we can work around the law, right, in a legal way. So, like we just did, 3 per acre that's a variable number. It's not a fixed number.
Right.
They said fixed.
Right.
You know.
No, I get the Todd at 250. That's very clear. That was a
Right.
cap in a district.
Right.
Right.
But
Here, anyone in the district could apply and receive the same treatment.
Correct.
So there's no disparity of treatment to like property owners. But if you read it, sorry, yeah, got it. But if you were to read it
We wait for it.
where numerical just means a number, then your only barrier to development on any particular parcel would be health and safety.
That's it. Otherwise,
It comes out, you can argue, and you will be arguing on the other side, that it is a fixed number.
Right.
Right.
So unless the traffic can't support it, the sewer can't support it, or the ground can't support it, it's approval.
right.
Correct.
Jeez.
Right.
But you know what, Kevin, as a practical matter, that's probably going to be a huge item. Because, they speak to infrastructure in here. If you don't have the infrastructure, I mean, there's a huge economic impact to that. I'm sure you're aware.
That the people who are telling us what to do don't have to pay.
I agree.
Well,
Yeah.
move on.
And I didn't put in here, but they made some changes to the WPCA statutes. Because again, up until now, you could not compel a municipality to expand its sewer system, right? They're starting to chip away at that as well. So, that, again, these are just things we need to be mindful of so that we conform to the law and we try to position our town as best we can. All right, the next one is require more than one parking space for each studio or one bedroom, or 2 parking spaces for each dwelling unit of 2 or more, unless the municipality opts out. So if you want to maintain control over your parking requirements, you need to opt out. So this is your second opt-out that you have to consider. Okay, and the opt-out process is the same. You have to hold a public hearing, you have to vote by 2/3, you have to state your reasons on the records. I just did an opt-out in North Branford last night. The town council voted to the zoning had voted to opt out. They sent it to town council and they approved it last night. So, it's a simple process if you want to opt out, but it's something for you to think about.
Is it required public hearing?
It's a public hearing. It's a vote of 2/3 or greater. State your reasons on the record
Here.
and publish in the paper.
And it's a vote here and a vote at BOS.
Yes.
Correct.
But that's the,
The sequence, here first,
Here first.
then to BOS. Okay.
Here with a public hearing.
Yes. Okay. All right. And now you're not allowed to deny any land use application, including any site plan approval, special permit, special exception, or other zoning approval on the basis of a district's character, unless such character is expressly articulated in such regulations by clear and explicit physical standards for site work and structures. So let's think about that for a moment. We may have to re-examine our regulations and say, we often refer to, we want to maintain the character of our neighborhoods or the character. Do our regulations explicitly, clearly and explicitly. So the next thing the commission needs to consider is whether or not it wants to be bound by the law of the state on parking or whether or not you want to retain control over parking. And again, my recommendation is you should retain as much local control as possible. So if you agree with that, then you would initiate proceedings to opt out. The next one is accessory apartments. And again, this is another opt-out. Now, what's important about this one is they set a deadline. January 1st of 2023, any municipality that fails to opt out by that date can never opt out. And you're forever then bound by the state's rules. And basically what the new rules provide is that every single family dwelling is entitled to have an accessory apartment, and it doesn't have to be related.
And it doesn't have to be
It doesn't have to be attached. It doesn't have to share a common. It doesn't have to share a common wall. Everything that your regulations don't allow.
Doesn't need its own entrance.
Doesn't
Yeah,
exactly
I was wondering about that. How do you get in there?
through its own.
A tunnel?
So
On it?
so what I suspect is
It doesn't
again.
need its own entrance. How do you get in the?
Go in the common entrance. Walk through
That's true.
your living room to their bedroom.
They're talking about a detached.
Well, it could be either or.
Either or.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
It's accessory.
Yeah.
Yeah. The point is, it's very flexible on what it needs to be, and I'm waiting for the towns that opt out to then be on a list, right?
Well,
And, right.
So,
I mean, my immediate reaction is, because we're so ingrained with local control here, I would opt out of everything. And now, are we setting ourselves up or setting us up for, in the state's eyes or in some other eyes, for some kind of a lawsuit or some kind of a
We're following the law,
right?
so they
There
can't.
aren't that many things that you can opt out on, though.
So far, there's 3.
There's 3, right?
Right, and I think that
This
There's
is
only
significant,
one
though.
with a
Up to
deadline.
3.
this is the
Yeah.
only one with a deadline,
Yeah.
right?
Well, they're all significant though, and most of them,
Oh, well, yeah.
You may not want to opt out of the parking. Maybe you'll take that one. I don't know.
Is
It's up
there a
to you.
way to track what other municipalities are doing?
The only thing I can tell you is, I don't know if like CCM or the COG would be
Right.
tracking that. I can tell you again, last night in North Branford, we did the parking. I'm having the same meeting with the zoning commission in North Branford, in Derby, in Seymour, in Beacon Falls, in Bethany, having the same conversation. And my recommendation to these regional towns are, you should opt out.
How would this proceed? I mean, would we, as a commission, have a discussion one night on our agenda and come to the conclusion that we'd like to opt out and then send it to a public hearing?
Yes.
Or do we send it to a public hearing first, hear testimony,
No,
and then
Gotta take a
decide?
what I would do is, on your next agenda or some agenda in the future, I would have to consider an act on referring whether or not we should opt out of parking to public hearing.
All right,
To
so
consider an act
we're not
on.
making a recommendation in the first instance.
You are deliberating on whether or not you want to whether or not you want to send it to public hearing.
That's what I'm asking.
Right.
But how do you
We're not-
notice the public hearing? You'd have to be on this selection of opting out.
Yeah, so then what
Notice.
you would sit around and say, I believe we should, there's consensus, we should opt out. So now you're gonna send it to public hearing and say that the zoning commission is considering opting out of the parking limitation, the accessory dwellings, or
Yeah.
or the
Right,
temporary.
You have to.
We would have to
Yeah,
take a
or-
position.
Position.
You would
right.
take a
You
position.
take a position on it first.
Right.
Right.
Then you have the public hearing.
Then you have the public hearing. Then you state your reasons. Then you publish, and then you refer it to the selectmen.
Yeah, I mean, it seems a little backward to me. It seems like you
Yeah,
would want to get
why-
testimony from the public.
Right.
To help
Otherwise,
you in
it seems
making our
like you're
decision.
pre-deciding.
Well, what you're doing is you're voting to referring the issue of opting out to public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
You're not deciding, Tom.
You're not
No, no,
prejudging it.
no.
You're
Taking a
voting.
stance.
That's what I'm getting at. I
Right.
mean, you don't want to have.
So you could, after the end of the public hearing and testimony, you could say, well, we don't want to opt out.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're not bound
because
by
there may be presented some very good reasons not to do so.
exactly.
So we wouldn't have to deny our own
It's not.
choice of opting out and then reopen one to say we don't want to opt
No,
out. We can
you're
make a decision based
referring
on
the
that one.
question of
Yeah.
whether to opt out to public hearing, and then you're closing your public hearing, and is there a motion to opt out?
Got it.
Okay.
It could die for no motion. It could, it could die for failure to pass the motion. So, but, that's the way you would process it. Okay? All right. Now,
Is there some requirement then that the Board of Selectmen act on it? Or
Yeah, so
we just
after-
assume that they would and
after you've acted, so after you've held your public hearing,
voted.
after you voted, after you've stated your reasons, and after you've published your decision. All right, just like any other application.
Yeah.
When that process is concluded, it then gets referred to the legislative body, the Board of Selectmen, and they now have to take action. And they have to pass it by two-thirds. So if you've gone through that entire process and they disagree with you, it fails.
Yeah, but they don't have to hold a public hearing
No.
or anything.
No, but vice versa.
True, it may not even reach them if we don't.
Correct.
Oh, yeah, right.
This is one of the few times that the legislative body of the town has the ultimate authority over you. Normally, they don't get to interfere in your zoning, but, nor do they want to, right? But, the legislature wants the zoning commissions and the legislative bodies to have their fingerprints on these issues, right? So that the position of the town is well stated.
Is there anything in the statute that you saw that identifies or explains what good cause would be?
Like for
Opt out?
example, town of North Branford last night stated their good cause for opting out of parking because their zoning regulations already adequately address the parking needs related to housing developments in its town, and that the state law is not going to make parking any better in the town of North Branford.
And we have a lot of, on that issue, we have a lot of flexibility in parking.
Right. Yeah, and you might say, well, I want to have, maybe I want to,
In our own regulations as they are now, we have
Right.
a lot of flexibility.
and that you want to maintain the flexibility of parking. And, doesn't, just because you have parking that says you need 3 per, you could say, we're going to do a half one on this one. So, all right. So the next, now we're getting into some compliance issues. So compliance, meaning going forward, ZEOs are to be certified beginning January 1st, 2023. So the zoning commission shall provide for the manner in which the zoning regulations shall be enforced, i.e. your ZEO. Any person appointed as a ZEO on or after January 1st, 2023 shall be certified in accordance with the provisions of subdivision 2. So
That get recertified every year, or is that?
now he has to be certified, yes. And the Connecticut Association of Zoning Enforcement Officials is going to establish a certification process.
Okay, so it's not the one, because I've been looking into it a little bit, it's not the one that's currently there.
It says each person as a zoning enforcement officer shall obtain certification from the Connecticut Association of Zoning Enforcement Officials and maintain such certification for the duration of your employment as a ZEO.
Okay.
So
And-
whatever they say, you do.
Yeah, that's fine. It's just any person appointed as zoning enforcement officer on or after January 2023.
I know, and I thought that as well. But theoretically, every time every time a zoning commission comes into being, right? Because you have an election coming up, this body is no longer going to exist, even though you all may come back and you may be the same people. You're technically a different body, right? Because there's been an election and there's been a new term. So technically, every time you begin a new set of 2 years, you should be appointing your ZEO, because that's
Do we do that?
We elect officers.
Yeah, we don't elect a ZEO.
right, because you have one in place.
But no,
and
he's selected by the first election.
Yeah.
it's actually the statutes. That's the way we do it. But the statutes give the authority to. Don't tell anyone. But the statutes give the authority to the zoning board.
Well, you guys you did have a review. It was a couple months after we were hired. It was a couple months after I was hired, but there was a review.
Yes. Well, now you're in trouble.
Okay.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Now you're in trouble.
So you're saying that they will be making a new certification program
Right.
for this law?
Right.
Are they going to be reaching out? Should I be?
Don't assume they're going to be reaching out.
Okay.
You are obligated to know the law, and you are obligated to conform to it.
Okay.
All right. So now you know the law. So,
And each member of the planning commission.
well, that's our next thing. So,
sorry.
So that's our next thing. No, you took the wind out of my sails. So you've agreed to step up and get paid a lot of money for what you do here. Now, beginning on and after January 1st, 2023, each member of a municipal zoning planning commission or ZBA, this Jack applies to the ZBA as well, shall complete at least 4 hours of training. So you have to do 4 hours of training per year, and you shall be trained on. So training shall include at least 1 hour concerning affordable and fair housing policies, and may also consist of process and procedural matters, including the conduct of effective meetings and public hearings and the Freedom of Information Act, the interpretation of site plan surveys, maps, and architectural conventions, the impact of zoning on the environment, architecture, and historic resources. So what have they said? You need to know at least 1 hour a year affordable and fair housing. So you all have. So what we should likely do is beginning January of 2023, maybe have a session where we bring someone in, and maybe we set it up one a quarter. You guys can figure that out, or you want to bang out 2 hours and you do it twice.
I think it'll be that loose where we can.
Do you
Yeah.
think
Or do
the
you think
state will
COG
organize it?
would do
Yeah,
it?
I
or
think I could.
regional?
I think I could come in and I
No.
could give you a training on FOI for an hour.
No, but I'm
And I
just
think
wondering
that-
if the state, will,
It's going
Are
to
they going to make
create.
us go somewhere rather than bring
No, I
somebody to
think-
us?
or
There's right now. There's no
devise a program.
right there, and that might be. Like, for example, you have once a year in March at Quinnipiac, they have a land use. It's like 6 hours.
Yeah.
You could go there and just spend your 6 hours on a Saturday and satisfy this, because they probably talk about affordable housing.
Right.
Right? So you could do that on a Saturday and be done. And you could all say, hey, let's just go do that, because you get updated on the
Yeah.
law, it's good to do, it's fun, we'll have lunch.
Talk about, there's a legal seminars for zoning commissions and.
Yes.
Yeah, that would probably
Yeah.
suffice for some.
Yeah, it's like, so you could probably do that.
That's not too-
But,
that's not
so,
Disclaimers if you've been on zoning for 30 years.
it doesn't matter if you've written the rules, right? So, and not later than March 1st of 2024, and every year thereafter, the zoning commission shall submit a statement to the Board of Selectmen affirming compliance with your training requirements of each member. So we'll probably need to come up with a little form
Yeah.
that will have to be signed each year by you. That I'm going to assume at the moment that this is kind of like the CEL requirements of the bar, the lawyers, that it's a good faith policy, that I've done my 20 hours this year.
It'll be good faith for a year or two, and then they'll flip it into
Right.
actually watching.
Right. And then it'll be a moneymaker for somebody.
Yeah.
Right? So you might want to start thinking about a business opportunity. Okay.
Good idea.
Affordable housing plan, not later than June 1st of 2022, and every 5 years thereafter. Like your plan of conservation and development, you now have to submit an affordable housing plan. So POCD is once every 10 years, affordable housing is once every 5 years. So you can do POCD and affordable housing together every 10 years. And then every interim, you would just have the AH.
And this we'll be hiring it out to some format?
Well,
This,
I'm going to say this. Be careful. You know, this is your plan. This is your town. When you delegate the responsibility to create a plan for you, like to the regional COG, this is what you get. So it's up to you. It's your decision.
But we
But
still have to adopt the plan.
yes, but when they come forward with their regional plan and then you reject it because it's calling you racist, and say, you know, how are you going to look then?
Well, then, do we engage somebody like we have in the past?
I would engage someone like Brian Miller or Glenn
Glenn
Chalder, and
Who gave us the Todd District?
right, and come up with your own plan.
It was legal then.
We made it legal.
Yes, it worked. It worked. Hey, you
Until
know
it was
what?
applied,
We tried. We approved it, right?
right?
So, all right. So moving on, outdoor dining, beginning April 1st of 2022. Zoning. So outdoor dining is as of right for all food establishments that conform to your regulations. So you cannot prohibit outdoor dining anymore. So you may want to take this into consideration for establishing regulations for outdoor dining to talk about site plan and what you want.
Safety, right.
Okay, because
We
otherwise,
have, outdoor dining.
beginning
Outdoor dining
April
is by
1st,
special
2022,
permit
they
now.
come in with
We have
a
standards.
application,
We do.
and it's an administrative process.
But we already have standards for outdoor dining.
Right,
Yeah.
but we'd have
we
to
do,
change
but it's
the
by
process.
special use. So you wouldn't,
Yeah, we have to-
at least to my understanding,
Yeah,
you wouldn't have to have a special use
It's
anymore.
as of right,
It's as of
beginning
Right.
April 1st.
But we would still need to approve a site plan only for the structure itself, not the conceptual use of outdoor
Right, so
dining.
we need to amend our,
You need
would.
to take a look at it and
Yeah.
see what needs to be done.
Yep.
Just to tighten it up. And as of right means they can have outdoor dining until 9 p.m. That's the state's cutoff. So if you want to make it later, you can make it later, but the state's cutoff is 9 p.m. All right? So those are the highlights of the new legislation. But what I also, obviously, we have cannabis. We're talking about that separately. And outdoor dining was in 21-1, and cannabis is in 21-1. But 21-29, we've just completed. And I also want you to be aware of, they changed all of the expirations of your approvals. So now, anyone who has previously gotten approved, most of them have been extended for a total of 19 years. So it's like the gift that keeps on giving. These permits, they just keep extending out.
so an approved site plan.
Right. So let me pull
Good
up
for
my.
19 years.
It all depends on when it got. Come on, computer. All right. So let's see. Initial accessory apartments. Yes, all right.
It was a good chart you had.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna
Yeah,
I'm trying to go to my chart. It was a great chart that I put together. So resident, all right, there's no change for site plans, let's see.
Send your critical dates memo.
Right, so for other site plans, where the deadline used to be 5 years, it's at least 14 years. So now when you approve a site plan, where you would approve it with a 5-year expiration, now you have to approve it with a 14-year expiration. Okay, so that's the law now. And you're allowed to give an extension up to 10 years from the date of the approval, but not to exceed a total of 19 years. Okay? So in our lifetime, we may see it built.
Do our regs allow for, they have 2 years to put a shovel in the ground, or they have to come back for an extension?
Yeah.
Is that null and void?
Well, it's always been, right, sort of null and void, right? Because
Well,
state law was
we've
5
always
years.
argued, we've never been challenged, but we've always argued that at the municipal level, we're allowed to make things as
More
restrictive, not less restrictive.
Right.
And as long as the state hasn't basically dominated the field, that it works. No one's challenged us. John Fallon was going to challenge us on it once, but we resolved that issue.
Right.
So-
Leverage, I think.
Right. So basically, you have, of significance, your approvals that were 5 years are now 14 years. Your extensions can extend an approval no greater than 19 years. And wetland permits now run with the zoning permit. So if you go to wetlands first and you get your approval, the start of the time clock, if a zoning application is connected to it, doesn't begin to run until the zoning permit runs, which makes sense, right? Because they can't start doing anything until they get their zoning. So basically, they've just, if there's a zoning application that's connected to a wetlands application, they both run concurrently. Otherwise it is 14 years or 19 years. So that's for expiration purposes. You got, when you're considering approvals, consider now that the approval that you're giving is going to be good for 14 years. All right? So you may want to take that into consideration. Other than that,
I know, you're, what are you going to do? That's what it is.
Yeah.
It complies with the regulations. Like on a
Right.
subdivision, for example.
right,
You have to approve it.
exactly.
And it's
And-
19, whatever it is, on a subdivision.
Right, and you could have
14 years.
you could have a partially developed subdivision that the developer goes belly up, and now can technically sit there for 14 years, right? As opposed to the way we used to have a little bit more control over it, like at Ravenswood. So again, something to be mindful of. We may want to. We may want to test some waters on checking if we can check the financial health of the developer in a way to, maybe there's something we can do with that. But again, these are just things you need to be aware of and things you may need to take into consideration.
What subcommittee or committee in Hartford oversees this? And did anybody have this on the radar? Any legislators that represent our area to just say, hey, there's some new stuff coming down?
No one brought it to my attention. There was a legislative update that came out at the close of the session. I printed out the public acts and I read them. So, and ordinarily I wouldn't bring this stuff to you. It's like a one-off, and I'm like, this doesn't affect us. But this was such an overhaul on so many things that, and I think it's the start of what's to come.
It's a movement.
It's definitely the start of a movement, and it's important for you to be aware of it because, we become aware of it, the other constituents in town become aware of it, and maybe there's a voice, the opposition voice starts being heard on this stuff. So, again, at the end of the day, we all live here. It's our town and it's our value. That's what we've worked for. It wasn't given to us. So, anyway, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to have the conversation. Otherwise, this was an informational, my recommendation is you put the opt-out items on your agenda. And
Yeah, why don't we, do that for, I guess we're gonna have the cannabis public hearing when? Second meeting in November?
First meeting in November on the 3rd, which is a
Okay.
Wednesday, I believe.
So
Yes.
maybe sometime after that, put the opt-out question on our agenda for a discussion amongst
General discussion.
Right.
ourselves. And then
For
we,
all of them at the same time.
yeah, all
Got it.
three, right? All three.
Yep. Will do.
And then, Jack, I think what we should do is we should look at the regs with this and then bring to the commission what we think needs to be
Yeah, what
addressed,
our existing regulations might contradict with on the new ones.
Exactly.
Yeah, got it.
rather than rely on them to bring it to us.
Sounds good to me.
Right?
Yeah, that's, yeah. Because otherwise, we'll just stumble over them when the situation presents itself, you know.
Exactly. So the other thing you might want to put on with the 3 is the question of the fees. You know, do you want to, because that's got to go to public hearing as well. Do you want to adopt a regulation
For
to
the consultants?
Yeah,
to
yeah.
the consultant fees?
Vinny's already asked the questions in his memo, so really, basically,
Right.
that's all
Right.
you have to do is put it on the agenda. And we can take it from there.
Yeah. And again, just for general discussion, obviously not
Right.
posing
Yeah, not
anything,
for a
just
public
yet.
hearing, and then we'll, you know, figure out when we're gonna hold a public hearing,
Yes, sir.
Christmas Eve or something.
All right.
That's it, Vinny?
I am good if you
Well,
are.
thank you very
Thank you very
much.
much,
That
Vinny.
that was
Absolutely.
very, very helpful. Very helpful. All right.
I think we still got to close our.
Yeah, do we,
You need a motion to close?
yes, we do.
Move to close.
Second that?
Generally, Paul takes care of that stuff.
Sorry?
All right, we have a motion to adjourn. It's been seconded, I believe.
Yes.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.